Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Um, Today we're going to tackle something I think a lot of you have been asking about.
Yeah.
It's interaction effects in management research.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and honestly, like this is one of those concepts that I always felt like I kind of knew,
Right.
but then when I really had to sit down and explain it, I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
how does this actually work? So we're going to explore that together today based on a super interesting journal article.
Absolutely.
And I will butcher this name, but it's called Reporting Interaction Effects, Visualization, Effect Size, and Interpretation by Kevin Murphy and Herman Guinness.
A Guinness, like the beer.
Like the beer.
Yes.
Thank you. I should have known that. And it's published in the Journal of Management in 2022.
Nice and recent.
Nice and recent.
Nice
So
there.
very relevant.
Yeah.
So maybe before we jump into all the details, can you just give us kind of a high-level overview of what interaction effects are?
Sure. So an interaction effect is basically saying that the relationship between two variables changes depending on the value of a third variable.
Okay.
So it's not just A causes B, it's A causes B depending on C.
Okay. That's helpful. And the article gives some really concrete examples of this, like in the real world, how does this actually play out?
Yeah, so there's this one example about how well different HR practices work together.
Yeah.
And that can actually depend on the type of organization.
Interesting.
So like certain HR practices might work better in a very hierarchical organization versus a more flat organization.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Exactly.
Got it.
And they also give an example about crisis management
Okay.
and how the success of different crisis management strategies can actually vary based on both individual leadership styles
Interesting.
and the overall company culture.
So it's like two things interacting to change the effect.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
They even had one about whether companies use more images or events in their charity campaigns.
Okay.
And they found that it was influenced by both their social performance record
Okay.
and how much they work internationally.
So interesting. So like depending on how good a company's doing socially and how much they work in different countries, they might use different types of charity campaigns.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like these interaction effects are kind of everywhere.
They are everywhere. It's like once you start noticing them, you see them everywhere.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like I kind of knew this, but now I'm like, wait a minute, there's interaction effects all over the place.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that the authors of this paper are trying to highlight.
Okay, so then what's the problem?
The problem is that they're not always reported very well.
Okay, so researchers know that these interaction effects exist. They see them in their data, but then they're not necessarily communicating them effectively.
Exactly. And this is a problem because if they're not reported well, it can mislead other researchers.
Okay.
It can lead managers and policymakers to make decisions based on sort of incomplete or exaggerated findings.
So it can have real-world implications if these aren't communicated well. So what specifically did they find in their review?
So they actually looked at 96 papers from top management journals.
Okay, so these are like the best of the best.
Exactly, like the top tier.
Bonus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they found some pretty troubling trends. So one was that over 2/3 of the papers either didn't include visualizations of the interaction effect at all,
Okay.
which makes it really hard to understand what's going on.
Yeah, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, as they say.
Exactly. Or they were using visualizations, but they were kind of manipulating the y-axis.
Oh, okay. So they were presenting the data in a way that was maybe a little misleading.
A little misleading, yeah. They were truncating the y-axis, which basically makes the effect seem bigger than it actually is.
Oh, so it's kind of like, those weight loss ads where they like change the camera angle
Exactly. It's the same idea.
to make the before and after look more dramatic.
Yeah, totally. And the other big problem they found was that almost 70% of the papers didn't provide a clear measure of how strong the interaction effect actually was.
Okay. So they were saying like, yeah, there's an interaction, but they weren't really saying how big of a deal it is.
Exactly. And that's a problem because something can be statistically significant, but not practically significant.
Right. So it might be like a real effect, but it's so tiny that it doesn't really matter in the real world.
Exactly. And that's what we really care about, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, we've got these two big problems, misleading visuals and missing information about effect size.
Yep.
So what do we do about it?
That is the million-dollar question. And luckily, the authors give us some really good recommendations for how to improve the way we report interaction effects.
Okay, so let's dive into those recommendations.
Let's do it.
And more importantly, figure out why they should matter to you, the listener.
Because it does matter.
Even if you're not a researcher.
Absolutely.
Stay with us.
So we're talking about how interaction effects are super common in management research,
Yeah, they're everywhere.
but they're often reported in a way that can be misleading.
Yeah, and we left off talking about these two big issues. Misleading visuals and not enough information on how strong the effect is.
Exactly. So the authors of this paper lay out 3 key recommendations for researchers to improve how they report these interaction effects.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one.
Perfect.
What's number one?
So the first one is all about fixing those misleading visuals.
Okay, so you're not saying get rid of visuals
Yeah,
altogether.
no. Visuals are super helpful,
Okay.
especially for understanding interaction effects. They just need to be presented in a way that doesn't distort the findings.
So, like, no more of those before and after photos where they're changing the camera angle to make it look like someone lost 50 pounds.
Exactly. It's the same idea. They're manipulating the axis, the vertical axis, on a graph
Right.
to make the interaction effect look stronger than it actually is.
So what's the solution?
The solution is simple. Just show the whole y-axis.
Okay, so no more zooming in on a tiny portion to make it look more dramatic.
Exactly. Show the full range of possible values.
So we can accurately compare results across different studies.
Right. Because if everyone's using a different scale, it's like comparing apples to oranges.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So full y-axis, no more visual trickery. What's recommendation number 2?
Number 2 is all about those missing effect sizes.
Right, because statistical significance doesn't always equal real-world significance.
Exactly. You can have a statistically significant finding that has like a tiny, tiny effect in the real world.
So it's like saying, this new weight loss drug is proven to help you lose weight, but then you find out it only helps you lose like half a pound.
Right. It's not exactly a game changer.
Not worth the side effects, probably.
Exactly. So the authors are saying, look, you got to include some measure of how strong this interaction effect actually is.
Okay, and they have a specific recommendation for how to do that.
They recommend using a standardized measure like delta R squared.
Okay, full disclosure, I'm not a statistician.
Mm-hmm.
So can you break that down for me in a way that like a normal person can understand?
Sure. Basically, delta R squared tells you how much of the outcome is explained by the interaction effect itself, above and beyond the individual variables.
So it's like saying this interaction is responsible for this much of the change we're seeing.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. So clear visuals, clear effect size reporting. 2 down, 1 to go.
Yeah.
What's the final recommendation?
So the third recommendation is about going deeper into the nature of the interaction itself.
Okay, so not just saying, hey, there's an interaction here.
Right. It's about understanding how that interaction works.
So what does that mean?
Well, they point out that there are actually 3 different types of interactions: strengthening, weakening, and reversing.
Wait, hold on. I thought an interaction just meant the relationship between 2 variables changes based on a third. Now we have 3 different types.
Yeah, so think of it like a volume knob.
Okay.
A strengthening interaction means that third variable cranks up the volume on the relationship.
Oh,
A weakening interaction turns the volume down,
got it.
and a reversing interaction flips the script entirely.
Whoa, so it can actually change the direction of the relationship.
Exactly. It can turn a positive relationship negative, or vice versa.
So it's not just about the strength of the relationship, it's also about the direction.
Right, and they emphasize that visualizations are key here.
Okay, so we're back to those graphs and charts.
Exactly, because it's much easier to see those volume changes or script flips when you can actually visualize how the relationship shifts across the different values of that third variable.
But instead of just looking at a table of numbers, we need to actually see those lines moving up and down and crossing over each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what helps us really grasp those nuances.
Okay, so visuals are important for more than just making the paper look pretty.
Right. They're essential for understanding what's really going on.
Okay, so we've got clear visuals, effect size reporting, and thinking critically about the type of interaction. Those are some pretty solid recommendations for researchers. But I'm still wondering, why does all of this matter to me, the listener?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll dive into right after.
We come back.
It's a quick break. All right, so we're back, and we've been talking all about these interaction effects and how they can really change the game when it comes to understanding research findings.
Right, and we left off with a big question, like, okay, this is all great for researchers, but why should I, the listener, care about any of this?
Totally fair question.
Like, I'm not writing any academic papers anytime soon, so
Right.
how does this help me in my everyday life?
Well, think about it this way. You're bombarded with information all the time, right? News articles, social media posts, even just conversations with friends.
Oh yeah, definitely information overload.
And a lot of that information is based on research studies, right? So understanding how to critically evaluate that research is more important than ever.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So knowing about interaction effects can make me a more informed consumer of information.
Exactly. It's like having a secret decoder ring that helps you see through the hype and get to the real story.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So give me some concrete examples. How can I actually use this knowledge in my daily life?
Well, let's say you read an article that claims that a certain leadership style is the key to success.
Okay, I've definitely seen those headlines.
Right. But now you know that it's not that simple. There might be an interaction effect at play.
So like maybe that leadership style only works in certain types of organizations or with certain types of teams.
Exactly. Or maybe there's some other factor like company culture or industry that's influencing the relationship.
So instead of just taking that headline at face value, I should be asking myself, okay, but under what conditions does this actually hold true?
Exactly. You're basically becoming a research detective.
I like it. I'm putting on my Sherlock Holmes hat.
And remember those reporting issues we talked about? Those misleading visuals and missing effect sizes?
Yeah, those were pretty concerning.
So now you know to be on the lookout for those red flags.
Okay, so when I see a graph, I'm checking that y-axis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make sure they're showing you the full picture and not just zooming in to make the effect look bigger.
Got it. And I'm also looking for some measure of effect size.
Right, because statistical significance doesn't always mean practical significance.
So just because something is statistically significant doesn't mean it's actually going to make a meaningful difference in my life.
Exactly. And don't forget about those different types of interactions.
Okay. The strengthening, weakening, and reversing ones.
Yeah, knowing which type of interaction is at play can help you really understand the nuances of the relationship.
So it's not just about whether there's a relationship, it's about how that relationship changes under different conditions.
Exactly. It's about understanding the whole story.
Okay, so to recap, I'm checking for misleading visuals,
Right?
I'm looking for effect sizes, and I'm thinking critically about the type of interaction.
That's it. You got it.
I'm a research detective on the case.
And by doing all of that, you're becoming a more informed and discerning consumer of information.
So it's not just about blindly accepting what I read or hear. It's about evaluating the evidence and forming my own conclusions.
Exactly. It's about thinking for yourself.
That's powerful stuff.
It is.
Well, a huge thanks to you for breaking all of this down for us.
My pleasure.
I feel like I have a whole new set of tools to navigate the world of research now.
That's great to hear.
And to all of our listeners out there, remember, keep asking those critical questions, keep digging deeper, and don't be afraid to challenge assumptions.
Absolutely.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.